Good morning to the honorable ministers of the council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 27th, 2019. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Christopher Waver, to address you.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning to the Honorable Prime Minister, colleague ministers, members of the media, and a special good morning to the residents of St. Martin. I have a few updates, a few announcements. As we noticed, the traffic lights are now back in function. What's happening right now, we're monitoring the timing of the traffic lights and then making the assessments and making the necessary adjustments as need be. So the timing might switch by a few seconds from one lane to the next, depending how this week goes. Next, also, the ministry is in collaboration with NVGEB to do assessments on the various street lights that are still off in the various districts. So we will hope to have those back up and running in most of the districts before December, before the holiday season. Lastly, for the Ministry of Romi, the cleanup campaign is still very active, and we are ready to launch on Saturday, October 30th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Government Administration Building in Room 1. The public is welcome to come, as we will be revealing the winning slogan. We'll also have the logo and the jingle that will November 30th, not October, November. As we are aware, the Minister of Justice is currently off island and would hereby like to inform the political parties contesting in the upcoming parliamentary elections on January 9th, 2020, that there are already laws in place which regulates public manifestations like political party gatherings and the use of billboards and banners in public space. Taking into consideration, amongst others, public order and safety. The Minister of Justice is, however, willing to set up certain guidelines for the political parties which are contesting and on how he will make use of his authorities and powers pursuant to inter alia, the General Police Ordinance and the National Ordinance on Public Manifestations. This will be done in the form of a policy paper and will be made public and also distributed amongst the political parties contesting. This concludes my press briefing for today, and I await any questions from the press. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Waver, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Renee Violinas, to address you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Good morning, St. Martin. Good morning, fellow Council of Ministers. Last week, during the press briefing, I guess in my angst, I neglected to thank the several persons that were giving their outpouring of love and appreciation, and for the fact that they are so happy to see me serving in this ministerial capacity. And I want to thank those people publicly for their outpouring. I also wanted to give a little bit of a background on who I am. I started off in the meteorological services, which is one of the things that falls under the Ministry of TIAT. From meteorological services, I proceeded to work in the Air Traffic Services Department. So I am an air traffic controller by profession. And so two things that fall under the ministry are capacities in which I have served, and I am happy to be here and to help in any capacity that I can. On that note, on Wednesday, November 20th, I made a visit to the port of St. Martin where I boarded the Norwegian Bliss, which was making its inaugural call here in St. Martin. The Norwegian Bliss was commissioned in 2018. The vessel can hold 4,000 plus passengers, and it was their inaugural visit. They will be back in 2020 on the 25th of January for their second call. Additionally, I was contacted by Mr. Scheper, who informed me that the SSCS cable, which is the Sabre Statia Communication Systems cable, which has landed here in Great Bay, had been damaged by a vessel and was in desperate need of repair. So the ministry signed off for the vessel to sail from Curacao to come to St. Martin for the repairs to start within the coming weeks. Had this cable not been repaired, significant telecommunications outages here in St. Martin and in Sabre and Statia may have been possible within the next week, next 2 weeks. However, it is going to be worked on in the coming week. The vessel should be here by Friday, and Monday, I believe, the work should commence. On the 25th of November, as promised before about the visits to the departments, that happened. We made use of the opportunity to visit the department heads meeting with SG DeWeaver. We dropped in and made a courtesy call to all of the department heads, and familiarization with them will happen in the not too distant future by the ministry. Since we've been sworn in last week, we have been in meeting after meeting after meeting. And as such, we were updated and briefed by the various relevant entities. The airport was a 4-day meeting session, the harbor, and Telem was yesterday, and subsequent departments will be following and having meetings with the Council of Ministers in the not too distant future. Just this morning, I requested from my cabinet to please get a copy of the process manual for aviation and the process manual for maritime on my desk as soon as practicable. The issue of the process manual is from the SOAB, and it was commissioned in May of this year. In the 17 processes for aviation and the 11 processes for maritime, it is focusing on the issuance of certificates, permits, licenses, and performing inspections. And one in particular that is closest to my heart, and for those of you that have been trolling since 2016, you will know that the registration of crafts and vessels, so aviation, aircraft, and maritime vessels has been near and dear to my heart. And as such, government can generate, or the departments can generate revenue from these particular processes. And so it is something that I would definitely like to see implemented in this cash-strapped economy that we are in. When I was first consulted for a ministerial function, some of you may know, your fellow colleague, Mr. Dick, broke the news, even though I was trying to keep it under wraps. I was consulted to function in the capacity of the Minister of Plenipotentiary. As such, you may be aware that the incoming ministers, so the Minister for TIAT and VSA, will be coming in this week. And as such, this will be my last press briefing as Minister of TIAT with you. This ends my opening statements, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Minister Violinas, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance and Acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Artwell Edion, to address you.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning to you, the Honorable Prime Minister, my colleagues, to the media, and to those of you viewing by all the different forms of media. I'd like to start in the capacity of Minister of Finance. The 2020 budget was handled by the previous finance minister and was sent on to the CFT and the Council of Advice. The completion of the 2020 budget is high on the list of priorities for this government, and therefore it's this government's intention to pick up where the previous government left off to avoid any further delays. Obviously, we have to also still present this budget to the members of parliament. However, the CFT and the Council of Advice have raised a number of concerns pertaining to this budget, which this government will have to address immediately. As I speak, the Finance Department is in the process of addressing these concerns raised by the CFT and the Council of Advice, in the view of a number of steps to be taken to finalize the 2020 budget. In all honesty, we visualize the completion to run into the first quarter of 2020. A Council of Ministers meeting is scheduled for this afternoon, in which the Finance Department will be presenting a presentation on the budget and the current state. That's the budget. As Minister of Finance, I'm also privy to a lot of data from other ministries, and what I have personally realized is that in government, we need to measure more. I'm a believer and a fan of measuring. I believe that what gets measured, gets managed, gets done. I see within government that we lack a lot of KPIs, key performance indicators. And I would like to take an example of USM, for example, in terms of vision. A vision, in my opinion, is supposed to be measurable. Every vision is supposed to be measurable. USM has a good example of this. The vision of USM is that, I'll paraphrase a little bit, that each household in St. Martin should have an associate degree. That's their vision. Their vision is that every household in St. Martin through USM should have, at the very least, at the very minimum, an associate degree in the household. Why is this important? That is a vision that we can measure. We could now say, in 2010, how many households we had with an associate degree, in 2020, in 2030. We can track. I believe in government, we lack visions. I had a sit down with the minister of, not minister, I had a sit down with the SG of the Ministry of ECOIS and the controller, and we discussed this. I do appreciate the fact, though, that we did have a vision in the ministry. And during our discussion, the SG also realized, hey, minister, this vision isn't measurable. I believe, and we will have further discussions on this, that we need a vision in every ministry that leads to then an overall vision for the whole government, which in my opinion will be along the lines of a better life for the country, St. Martin. This vision for the Ministry of Education will come through the ministry. So it's not the vision of, it's not my vision, it's not a vision of the SG, it's a vision that has to be created from within the organization. Every person within the organization should know what this vision is. That then empowers the employees, empowers us as civil servants to know our purpose, why we are doing this, why we come to work every day. Yesterday also, I personally have put on the agenda for the next Council of Ministers meeting the evaluations of SGs. And it's not because we think that SGs are doing a bad job, but it's just the fact that at the end of the day, I, as a minister, I am accountable to the members of parliament and to the people of St. Martin, of course. Members of parliament are accountable to the people of St. Martin. Department heads are accountable to the SGs and so forth. But if you look along the lines of the last 10 years since we became country status, there's one group that they're not really held accountable. And I thought it was very important that they are held accountable. And in my opinion, a feedback system is also necessary. So not just that we evaluate them, but the employees under them give feedback. Not evaluate, but give feedback. I believe feedback also gives growth. You know, if someone criticizes me, through this criticism, I could also grow. In my opinion, the SG asks their employees, their department heads, how can I help you, help me, help the ministry? So this is a high priority for me, and I believe the Council of Ministers. So on our next Council of Ministers meeting, that will be a key topic. I also have an update from the Ministry of Education. This weekend, Sunday, December 1st, 2019, will be our annual Thanksgiving service. The theme this year will be, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good." It is a collaboration between the government, the St. Martin Christian Council, the St. Martin United Ministerial Foundation, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and yes, that is it. So again, I would like to remind the public, this Sunday, December 1st, 2019, the praise and worship starts at 4:30 p.m., and the service starts at 5 p.m. And that'll be all, and I will conclude my press briefing, and I look forward to your answers, to your questions.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Silveria Jacobs, to address you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Pleasant good morning to my colleagues here in this press briefing, to the members of the media present, as well as those staff members of the cabinets present, and all those following this broadcast. It is indeed a blessed day to be alive and to be able to work towards the improvement of the lives of the St. Martin people. 1 week into office, I would like to, many of my colleagues have already stated, but reiterate that we most definitely hold a record for having hit the ground running. As soon as we were sworn in last week, Tuesday, we went straight into meetings for the sake of gaining as much information as possible related to the reconstruction, the refinancing of the airport, as it has been a top priority and been delayed due to especially bondholders being wary of our political situation and whether the sitting Council of Ministers at the time was authorized to sign off on the agreements. Despite many meetings back and forth to reiterate such explanation of our system, they remained wary. So first order of the day was to finalize or get us close to finalizing these agreements as soon as possible. As such, the Secretariat organized, and I must thank Ms. Cassandra Janssen, our SG, for organizing several meetings moving forward from that day to today. Besides being updated by the many stakeholders as related to the airport reconstruction, our Council of Ministers held an emergency meeting last week in order to authorize the travel of our Justice Minister to be able to attend the CFATF plenary sessions, which started on Sunday. Minister traveled, Minister was able to speak to the delegations yesterday, and we look forward to hearing the news once tomorrow's meeting is held, where the plenary session between all of the other delegates from the Caribbean to decide on St. Martin's fate. We trust that all of the information will be taken into consideration, and we wish our minister much strength in the further deliberations. As far as our schedule goes, during this week as well, we had our ministerial consultation with our Kingdom partners of the Dutch government. Of course, the VNP, Chris Johnson, was present, and we were able to have a very fruitful meeting with our Council of Ministers and the minister, sitting Minister Knops, as well as Minister Deckers. We were also briefed by the Progress Committee on the prison and the police corps, and also held meetings. So we had two different meetings with in terms of our ministerial overlay consultation, one on the airport refinancing and one about the Progress Committee of the prison and justice chain. We have reiterated to our partners how important we find it as a Council of Ministers to cooperate, collaborate, and of course communicate on a basis of mutual respect and understanding in order to build the trust that is necessary that we can move forward in a positive manner. I must say that it was well received, and especially with the decision taken last Friday in the Kingdom Council of Ministers, where we were represented by the Director Carol Volkers of the Plenipotentiary Cabinet. The Council of Ministers authorized her to sit in on that meeting and speak on our behalf, whereby we were asking for an update or a postponement of the payment of the bridge loan, which was due on the 15th of November. As we move forward with that, it has been extended, of course, to January, thankfully, 15, 2020, of course, with St. Martin having to live up to certain agreements in order for that to happen. We will continue for the rest of the week with more informative meetings with our government-owned companies, as well as a presentation on our budget. We already heard the Minister of Finance elaborate on that. As far as the reconstruction of the Princess Juliana International Airport is concerned, the government reiterates that based on our information sessions, that the NRPB and airport has agreed to share all documents, and I believe transparency was one of the biggest problems that the Parliament of St. Martin had with the agreements that had been presented. Not enough information had been shared by the previous government, and as a government, we wanted to open the doors that all who are involved and all who are expected to take the decision are aware of what is in these agreements. As such, those confidential agreements also were made available to the members of Parliament, of course, ter inzage, so under 4 eyes, with the Secretary General of the Parliament. So that will take place from Tuesday to Thursday this week. They can make appointments to go and actually read any and all documents that are confidential pertaining to the agreements. We are hoping that with the openness and transparency that we are aiming for with this new government, that we will be able to finalize our understanding of what the agreements are and move forward in a positive manner so that the airport can be secured with financing to start the rebuilding process as soon as possible. We also received an update from the NRPB on the recovery projects in general. It was a very extensive and technical presentation. Of course, you cannot get it all in one sitting, and we are very pleased with what we have received thus far. The NRPB falls directly under the Ministry of General Affairs, and so I am therefore in daily contact with them and will continue to update the general public as information develops. I would encourage persons, though, to visit the website of the NRPB as well as government to personally read for themselves and get more information, because a lot of times people get partial information and run with it. And of course, if you've ever played a telephone game, which as a teacher I have used as a tool to teach children how when you start one story, it changes by the second telling, that it is important that we give facts to the general public and not create hysteria. One thing we have learned from our discussions with the NRPB and moving forward is that though this process has taken extremely long, everyone is disappointed about this, and of course, notwithstanding the loud voices that we ourselves had from Parliament, we're not going to come over here and speak differently. The message from the Council of Ministers is let's talk more action. We would like to see more action. However, because the Dutch chose to use the World Bank as the conduit for these funds, this became a problem. The World Bank procedures are what they are, and we cannot, at this point, change it. What we can do is change the way we address and where we would put certain projects that we would consider urgent. So we are looking forward to that. This process has also given the opportunity for St. Martiners to be able to grow. And procurement processes, we have grown in that. What we've seen also, though, is with the movement of some of the IRC committee to the NRPB, that we now have gaps in our civil service. So this is an opportunity, I would say, for St. Martiners, qualified St. Martiners, to look into becoming active agents in the change that we want to see. There are now several vacancies that are open, and if we do not fill them in a timely fashion, they will be cut from our budget. That is basically the realisticness, or the reality, excuse that. Wow, Teacher Jacobs. The reality of our situation with limited liquidity. We must be able to fill the needed positions with qualified, and we would want St. Martiners first of all. So this is an appeal to St. Martiners in the diaspora. St. Martiners, right here on St. Martin, look at what is available and make that contribution, because we have several key positions in government that are now vacant, which even with the money landing yesterday, we would have problems to execute. So I am appealing to you, and I'm of course appealing to our government organization to, not drag their heels with that is concerned. And that falls directly under me, so I will definitely be moving forward with that. As part of my meetings, as some of you may have known, the SER has been publicly expressing its discontent with the manner in which it has been handled over the past years. And as a matter of seeing the importance of this, I had a meeting with the director, the SG of the SER, as well as Mr. Damian Richardson of the board, chairman of the board, where I was able to get a lot of information that I believe is important to be able to move forward in a positive manner. The SER has therefore given us some time to be able to solve this problem internally, and I hope that the general public will also be as patient. Coming up next week, the ministry is in the process of finalizing all preparations for the SEDEMA safeguarding our economies and building sector resilience. It is part of the 11th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, SADM 11, and St. Martin is hosting this from December 2nd to 6th, 2019, under the theme, The Road to Resilience Checkpoint 2019, Safeguarding Our Communities, Livelihoods, and Economies. It's an honor for us to be able to host such a conference, and the general public will be updated as to the scheduling, who will be the speakers, etc., during the coming week. Also coming to the attention of my office as Prime Minister, seeing that the Minister of VSI is also represented by MP Doran and is absent at the moment, is the so-called crisis related to the shelter situation. I have received an update from the ministry in that the shelters that are currently operating, so there is one that is being operated in the Soccer Garden area, the Dr. J Foundation is charged with the management of this shelter. Contrary to several rumors and the crisis that is being perpetrated in the public, it is not as dire as is being projected in the public. This is not to minimize the seriousness of the situation. The shelter was organized to be able to meet the needs of the persons. More than 102 persons have passed through the shelter. The Dr. J Foundation has promised that they will be issuing a press release before the end of the week, which would give the full explanation. But as the minister in charge at this moment of VSR, I would like to at least update on the fact that this foundation is actively working with the current residents, which are 4 families, which can range from 2 to 3 to 4, but maximum 4 in total, as well as single persons amounting to a total of about 21 persons still requiring permanent placement. The Dr. J Foundation is actively seeking solutions, going with these persons. During the process, they have assisted them to create a savings, to be able to make the necessary purchases once something is found. The St. Martin Housing Foundation has apparently also been involved, but not enough clarity is forthcoming at this time as to how involved they are and what role they are playing in the placement of these families. But I will definitely be looking out for that press release, as well as a meeting with the Dr. J Foundation to be properly updated and then share the information with the general public. I have also, as Minister of General Affairs, and this is my final announcement, been able to meet with the department heads currently of General Affairs, of which, as I mentioned before, several are functions that need filling. So you constantly have persons sitting in for others. There are a lot of concerns that have come forth from the Ministry of General Affairs, which we will be tackling one by one. Priority is, of course, legislation at this point, as 2 of the 5 requirements is about legislation in terms of this interim government. I'm also going to be looking at what legislation is actually ready to be able to push out, and focus also on what has been talked about with much discussion in the past few weeks is the screening process. As we may know, it is constantly complained about when a process of screening has to take place. However, we have only a Landsbesluit, a national decree, which decrees how this is done. I have seen recently a draft national ordinance, which the legal department will be perusing, and we will have stakeholders discussions in terms of what St. Martin wants for its screening process. Of course, it by no way means that we do not want to have a screening at all. We must, as a country, show that we want corporate governance, good corporate governance, trustworthy persons holding the highest executive office, and as such, we will be looking at what the stakeholders expect, what Parliament would like to see, and move forward with that piece of legislation as soon as possible as well. This is all I will say at this moment in terms of opening remarks, but as always, I remain open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing. We now move on to the question and answer session. Stephen Cerulean of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Prime Minister, Ministers, good morning. My question is for the Minister of Finance. You said that the CFT has some concerns. In fact, they have raised some concerns as it pertains to the 2020 budget. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? What are those concerns?
Good morning, Mr. Civilian. As of now, as I mentioned in my press briefing, we're having a meeting, a detailed meeting at 2 o'clock, I believe, and I'll be able to give more information after that meeting. We have bits and pieces of information right now. I've spoken with the SG, but I would prefer that we have the meeting with the Council of Ministers first, and then relay the information to the press.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Dimitri Whitfield of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Hi, so good morning to the Council of Ministers and to St. Martin. My first question is to either the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance. It was reported in the media recently that the financing to reconstruct the Princess Juliana International Airport will be signed in the coming weeks. Can you give an idea of exactly when this will be, and why is it going to take so long given the dire situation that the airport has reportedly been in?
Thank you for your question. Yes, there was an article out in your paper, I believe, and I was also misquoted. I'm pretty sure you saw the retraction. They said days, and I actually said weeks. Since coming into government, we have been discussing every single day, looking for opportunities to get an airport deal done as fast as possible. As you can imagine, it's not only the airport we're dealing with right now, but out of the 5-6 days I've been in office, 4 to 5 of them have been dealing with the airport. Yesterday, again, we had a meeting with the NRPB pertaining to the airport financing again. I do believe, though, that we are all on the same page. We all know the importance of the airport being back online, the importance that the airport has not just for our tourism, but for our tourism is for the hotels, the livelihood of the people of St. Martin. And trust you me, that's one of the main priorities for me. I believe, though, that we're getting a lot closer. And I must say, one of the complaints that we had in the past, even for myself as being a member of Parliament, was the communication. What we have done is communicated with the members of Parliament, with the, yesterday, for example, or for the past 2 days, the confidential information pertaining to the airport has been sitting at the Parliament building where all MPs could have gone and visited and seen the reports for themselves. So there's no more the MPs fighting for information. The information is there. After the information has been reviewed, we will then proceed with NRPB, again speaking to the bondholders and the World Bank. So I'm hoping again to have it finalized in a few weeks. I believe it is possible with all of us putting our heads together and honestly taking away a little bit of the emotional factor and dealing with the reality of our situation.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Prime Minister?
Thank you, Dimitri. Yes, I think I did. And Minister Arian further explained about our discussions with the NRPB and the airport. What is important is that communication and transparency. Also, what is a setback is the stance of the bondholders. So there are several legal hurdles besides us getting information that have to be bridged, which we cannot, are out of our control, if you can understand what I'm saying. So once we can get all the legal hurdles covered, there are several parts, there are complex agreements that once this agreement is in place, then the next one has to come, and then the next one, I believe 6 agreements in total. And we can, by next week, early next week already, sign off on one part of the agreement, which would bring the 72 million guilders to government. However, the rest of it would still be contingent upon other areas. So the rest of it is outside of our control. There are areas in which the bondholders need to be convinced that all that sitting ministers are authorized to sign off is also something that we must ensure that is in place. So discussions on a legal level needs to continue. We are being apprised. We are understanding more about how these agreements sit in each other. From the outside, that was definitely not clear. So this past week of information has proven to be quite enlightening to the Council of Ministers. And having the bridge loan, at least, you know, that the airport is not expected to pay that back prior to having received funding, also gives an ease in terms of the, the rope that they felt was around their necks. The board members of the airport are working on finalizing the screening process that is necessary. And so I believe all hands are on deck to get it moving, and we will stay positive that it will happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Nikisha Boseman of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning, ministers, and good morning, all, Mr. Martin. My first question is for Minister Iridian. Several weeks ago, the finance minister, the former finance minister, Minister Khairlin, said that the country have about 20 to 25 million guilders in its coffers. What do we have now, and what is government's plan to better the financial situation?
Thank you for your question. Again, this afternoon we're having a meeting pertaining to the budget. I will also be updated on the liquidity situation and the cash for the country. I was updated about last week, and last week we had about 20 million, I believe. Between then and now, I haven't been updated pertaining to our liquidity, but by this afternoon I will be, and I will then again relay the message to the media. We, being a former financial controller within the ministry, I know a couple of key things. For example, that soon we will be having the payment of the licenses coming in for the cars, the road tax. Then we will see a slight spike in our income. So our income for the country St. Martin, we see that in January there's a high spike, and it starts to go down from January, February, March, and so forth until it hits May again. And we basically get a flat line until the high season kicks in again. So our budget is mainly in terms of cash is spike, down, and back up. So we can see a spike, a slight spike in January. I am expecting because of the road tax, but I will be updated this afternoon pertaining to the exact amount of liquidity of cash we have on our accounts.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to our minister today. Question to the Minister of Education. Minister of Education, you highlight the word vision. You said that the government lacked vision, but I believe you are very honest with that statement. And In what area? I mean, it can be a lot of areas, but what's the high point that you would like to see addressed as now?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Pertaining to my statement pertaining to vision, it was not necessarily saying that government lacks vision on a whole. It was basically saying that we need to have a vision for government to tackle certain issues. For example, one of the main concerns of the community is the instability within government. We have ministers coming and going. We have elections every 18 months based on the historical data. But one thing that doesn't change or isn't supposed to change is a vision. So it is my belief, for example, if you have a vision for education and you say, this is your vision, and a new minister comes in, most of the time, I believe they will work within that vision. Yes, they might have a couple of their own political projects or pet projects and so forth, but then at least it should align with the vision of the ministry. And the vision of the ministry should align, all ministries should align their visions with the overall vision of the government. And that is what I see that's lacking within the different ministries. We are not working on key performance indicators. We're not measuring, are we succeeding as a government to reach our vision? And so that's what I meant with the vision. And every vision should be measurable. I should be able to say, any minister should come in and say, like I said, I'll go back to the vision of USM. That I believe is a good example. Their vision is every household in St. Martin should have, at the very least, minimum education level of an associate degree. It is something they can measure. They could go back and check the data. Are we reaching our vision? No, we've only reached 50%, 60%, 70%. No matter who is the director of USM, they fall in line with the vision. And I believe, again, what gets measured, gets managed, gets done. Once you can measure something, you can manage it, and then you can get it done. And without that, I believe we'll be doing ad hoc things all the time. We'll be blaming ministers and so forth. But it's basically the fault of government as a whole for not measuring.
Thank you, Minister Edion. We now move on to the second round of questions. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you. Prime Minister, you said that there are some key vacancies open within government. What you failed to do was to see what vacancies are those. Can you tell us, please?
Thank you for that question, Stephen. At this time, as I said, I had a general meeting or a get to know the department heads meeting where they were able to highlight concerns. It was a very quick meeting. We'll be having further meetings, but in that meeting, across the board, practically every department had an issue with personnel. Several of them even had sector heads that were missing. So I cannot go into the specifics at this time, as I didn't receive it in writing. But for sure, I know that there are at least 3 that are sector heads or department heads that are missing. I don't know if it's already updated on the website, but I will ask for that to be done as soon as possible so that the general public can be aware. Or as soon as I get the update, that we can then put it out there, that the applications can start to come in. For me, it is important because what I've noticed, and which once we get the presentation from the department on the budget that had been made by the previous government, and understanding that the extra cuts that have been required to make it viable, I think we must do some type of pushback where that is concerned, because here we are, we've established a National Recovery Plan Bureau, which is receiving funds or is the conduit for the funds, the recovery funds through the World Bank, Dutch recovery funds. We made agreements for this 2 years ago. Because of this process, it is taking very, very long. The interim committee, some of these persons went to work for the NRPB. The NRPB itself also has several vacancies. They cannot put them out right away. It's only how many that they can handle at a time. This was also brought to our attention. So there are vacancies as the NRPB. There are vacancies within government that are key to us being able to execute the planned projects to be able to recover the way we want to. So we can sign all these agreements before the end of the week, and we will still hear that we are unable to execute this or that because, for instance, in Buck, we are missing key people. I can't tell you what is Buck in English?
Interior and Kingdom Relations.
The department that handles Kingdom Relations. So that's a very important department that is working closely with the NRPB. In the NRPB, several, I can't tell you off the top of my head either, but several, they have 14 persons, 14 vacancies available. That is quite a lot out of 23. So there are 9 permanent persons. The others are just consultants. We really need to get these positions filled in order to be able to carry out the much needed work regarding the programs and projects that are online to be handled by the NRPB and with the collaboration of government. What people need to understand, Stephen, is that the NRPB and government are not at opposing sides of the same problem. The NRPB is the execution of the approval of projects, etc., bringing it in. Government has to approve all the projects or present which projects we consider priority, and then together with the stakeholders, get it executed with the NRPB. So we need each other and we need personnel.
Minister Edion?
I would just like to add one point to that question, especially pertaining to the NRPB. In my opinion, and I believe the opinion of others also, using the World Bank as an institution to manage emergency funds was a bad idea. The World Bank is an institution that's supposed to manage long-term projects, not for short-term emergency projects. And a project typically takes in the World Bank about 1 to 2 years just to be executed. So when the World Bank works for for other countries, for example, the IMF and World Bank, they're basically similar organizations. If I want, for example, to start a roof project with the IMF and World Bank outside of St. Martin, the project takes about 1 year initially for the program, and then the second year for the plan of the execution of it. So for me, using the World Bank as a body to execute emergency programs was a slightly bad idea, but it wasn't up to us. And we see, for example, that only $80 million have been spent so far out of a committed 268, I believe. And this is mainly because of that process. In the meetings of the World Bank yesterday, NRPB, we stressed on this matter, and they also understand our concerns. And we are going to work towards finding ways of making this process a lot faster, and speaking to the kingdom, speaking to Holland about how can we make this process faster to have this money reaching the people that need to be reached and in a certain time. So that's one key point I would like to make clear is the process of the World Bank from NRB to World Bank back to government is way too long.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Dimitri, you have the floor.
Hi, my second question is for the Prime Minister. It was reported this morning that as of tomorrow, the Council of Ministers will add 2 new persons. That would leave 1 vacancy being the Minister of ECYS, Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. Does that vacancy plan to be filled, or will it remain vacant in the interim?
As I have the minister right next to me, I'm sure he would be able to expound more. But yes, let me reiterate, I did have it as a point to make during the press briefing, but after Minister Tiat kind of buzzed the pot, I'm like, it's said. Yes, after I had hoped my formateur position would have been finalized by now so that I can continue with the work, the necessary work of Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, but it was still an ongoing process. We have finally been able to get the other 2 ministers that we were discussing from the beginning. Incoming candidate Minister Melissa Doncher, Arundel Doncher, and Mrs. Pamela Gordon-Carty to come in. As I have stated to the press last night, Mrs. Arundel Doncher will be coming in the Ministry of TIAT, and Mrs. Gordon-Carty in the Ministry of VSA. As such, our current Minister of Finance and Acting Minister of ECYS will continue to be tasked with that responsibility. We believe that he is quite capable and up to the task, has very strong support within the cabinet and the respect of the council to be able to do so. Why? Because it is a very short interim period. If we were to continue to screen persons or start the screening of persons at this time in a process that takes 4 to 6 weeks, it would be election day. And as of election day, you become demissionaire. It doesn't make sense neither financially nor practically at this point to start the process for any new persons. It was imperative for us to get a council of ministers and a qualified council of ministers in as soon as possible. And that's why we didn't delay until everybody was finalized. However, it was always a very positive outlook. And of course, we want to make sure and cross our T's and dot our I's to ensure that there is no possibility of schending, as they would say in Dutch, hovering over any of our ministers, that we are all cleared, we are all ready and willing to go, and the cabinets of finance and education, culture, youth, and sports are well covered under our sitting Minister Arian.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Nakisha Boseman of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
My second question goes to the Acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. Last month, we inquired about the construction of the Prince William Alexander School. Apparently, construction has paused. The minister at the time said they was going to look into it. Are you aware of this? Has there been any updates to the ministry?
I am aware of the situation. I have requested the information to be sent to the cabinet, and I have not been updated as yet, but I'm pretty sure I will be as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Minister Waver, good morning again. Question is about the ongoing beach contention from Mullet Bay to Great Bay to Guana Bay. There are a lot of people who build houses close to the beach, and they take over the beach, meaning the people of St. Martin has no more access to the beach. But according to what I know, according to the International Convention, the beach belongs to the people. So elaborate on this, please, Minister.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. You said it, you answered the question as you asked it. Basically, the beaches are for the public, and nobody is allowed to block or hinder that access for the general public to go to the beach.
For instance, Guana Bay, you cannot access, the people have gates. Also,
On the
security.
beach?
Yeah, down Guana Bay. I don't know if you have went there recently, but you cannot access the beach.
You can walk through. There's always a path to at least walk to the beach. I know if you go Guana Bay side, there might be a little more difficult, but once you reach to the Guy Estate part, there is roads leading to the beach there.
There's a gate there.
It is open. There is. I pass there frequently, and you're able to go to Guana Bay Beach. So, but I'll double check to verify for you. But to my knowledge, it is accessible to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Waver. As we are pressed for time, this does end our question and answer session. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 27th, 2019. For rebroadcast, tune in every evening at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV and via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at www.stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach, and wishing you a pleasant day further.